Hey everyone, welcome back to This Book Belongs to Pam. I am going to be doing my November wrap-up. So I read a total of 8 books for this month. That is a mix of an audiobook, a physical book, and 6 Kindle books. So I'm super excited because it's a good reading month for me and I really enjoyed a lot of the books that I read this month. So the first book that I read is A Kind Worth Killing by Peter Swanson. I actually did a reading vlog for this. It's part of like a thriller 101 readathon, so I will link that. Kind Worth Killing is a thriller book and we are following 2 characters, Ted and Lily, and they meet at an airport bar and they hit it off and just got to talking, sharing all of their intimate details. And then eventually they arrive at this topic of working together to kill someone. I rated Kind Worth Killing 3.5 stars because honestly, while the plot was very engaging, I felt like the atmosphere and the logic was a bit lacking because the atmosphere, there was no atmosphere at all. It's not made for the thriller vibes. It's just very plot heavy. This is what happens, this is what happens next, this is what happens to this character. No vibes were made at all, no atmosphere. As for the logic, there are quite a number of things that are very convenient. It is logical, but it's very convenient, so you know that it wasn't like this elaborately planned device. Some parts of it, some of it are really good, but some of it are very convenient, and yeah, so those just took away a little bit from the experience of reading it. But the plot was good, the characters were partially good. The beginning was a bit slow, but after part 1 it really popped off and I just had a good time. So the next book was actually an audiobook. I listened to Daisy Jones and the Six by Jenkins. This is my first ever full-fledged audiobook experience. I have dabbled a little bit into audiobook and I listened to a couple of chapters, but then I eventually always either switch back to physical book or I soft DNF it. So this is the first time that I listened to a book from start to finish in audiobook format, and I 100% enjoyed my time with this book because it was narrated by a full cast, and I think because of the format of the book, which is written mostly in interview transcripts, it really lent itself well to the audiobook format. So Daisy Jones and the Six, what is it all about? I think a lot of people know about this book already, but we are essentially following Daisy Jones, a singer-songwriter, and the Six, a band. So we're following their journey as they rose to fame, but at the height of their popularity, they disbanded. And nobody in the world knows why until this book. So that's sort of the pitch for Daisy Jones and the Six. I also did a reading vlog for this, so you can check it out. It's one of my favorite reading vlogs in a long time, so really proud of that one. Honestly, this is a 4-star book for me. The atmosphere was just through the roof. I wouldn't say it's a plot heavy book because it's kind of like an autobiography of a fictional character slash band, and Jenkins is just so good at creating characters that make you feel like they're 100% real, so you're just following their lives. And I really enjoyed that format. I enjoyed it in Malibu Rising. I enjoyed it in Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. This is honestly Jenkins Reid's special skill when it comes to writing. So I enjoyed that. The full cast for the audiobook also greatly increased my experience because they're just wonderful. They delivered all of their lines with the emotions that I thought the text deserved, and that was a really good experience. So yeah, 4 stars all over. Honestly, I have nothing more to say. Just go watch the reading vlog because I talk a little bit more about it in that video. Okay, the next book that I read in the same reading vlog was Behind Her Eyes by Sarah Pinborough. So this is a thriller book and one of the best thriller books I've read in a while. The ending was just fucking amazing. This is about this single mom named Louise, and she meets this very charming, handsome doctor, like a psychiatrist named David. So they meet in a bar, they kind of like kiss and make out a little bit because they hit it off. They found each other really funny. But then the next day, Louise realizes that this guy was apparently her new boss because she's a secretary and he's the new psychiatrist. And the cherry on top is that he is married to this beautiful, gorgeous woman named Adele. Now, in this book, we're following two perspectives, which is Louise's perspective and Adele's perspective. And holy smokes, I love this book. From the get-go, you don't really know where the conflict is. I mean, obviously, there's this drama about him being married and having an affair and whatnot, but then Louise starts to pick up on cues that their marriage is not at all what it seems. They seem so perfect and happy, but behind closed doors, she suspects that it's not the case, because she eventually gets to befriend the wife. And it's just this crazy, like, she's being pulled by the wife and the husband and this tug of war, and she's just in the middle of it all. Poor Louise. But it's really enjoyable because the perspectives, like the difference in the tone of Adele's POV and Louise's POV is just 100% amazing. Adele is creepy as fuck. I was really freaked out every time it's her chapter, because she just says things that just gives me goosebumps. And I think the author did a really good job at revealing certain hints, certain crumbs about things that will happen in the future without really making it super obvious. Like, sometimes I would be reading a passage and then a few paragraphs later I would be like,
wait, how does that person know that information?
Like, how did that happen? And then it will all make sense in the end. Now, as much as I rave about this book, the ending is a bit so I said earlier that the ending was amazing. It is amazing, but there's just one too many plot twists in the end, and I think the final plot twist wasn't really necessary because it wasn't foreshadowed well enough. So the first plot twist, that was fucking amazing. I was like really losing it. If you watch a reading vlog, I was losing it while I was reading that plot twist. But then the next plot twist hit, and that was kind of like an overkill. But hear me out. If you enjoyed the book, I highly suggest you watch the Netflix adaptation. Anyway, it's on Netflix, and I think it did an amazing job. It's better than the book, and I don't say that lightly. It did a really good job with foreshadowing all of the plot twists, and I was really invested. Even though I knew what was gonna happen, I was still very much invested. I think this one is a 4.5 star book. Yeah, 4.5 stars for Behind Her Eyes by Sarah Pinborough. So the next books that I read, actually read them back to back in what is supposedly a readathon. What day am I uploading this video? By the time that you watch this, I've already uploaded it as part of Bookmas as well. So I will leave a link to it below. I read It Ends With Us and It Starts With Us by Colleen Hoover. Now, these two books are super popular, and honestly, I just got curious because a lot of people talk about these books, and there's some polarizing opinions, especially on how the sensitive topics are presented in the book. So I just wanted to know, what is the deal with these books and why is it dividing the community? How do I talk about this book? So It Ends With Us tells us the story of our girl Lily, and
is her name also Lily? Okay, so the name of
Lily! Her name is also Lily. So it tells us the story of Lily. She falls in love with this guy named Ryle. Then they basically, you know, have this whirlwind romance. Things start to fall apart because Lily is starting to see this side of Ryle that is opposite of what she knows about him. When they started dating, Ryle was this very handsome, charming, smart, kind, funny, thoughtful guy. They get to know each other more. Lily starts to see the cracks on the facade that Ryle has put up. Ryle has anger management issues. He has a temper. He starts to hurt Lily physically and starts to gaslight her. All of the telltale signs of abuse. So yeah, things just fall apart for Lily, and we're just sort of in her head seeing how this is affecting her, how she copes with it, how she suffers and everything. So it's not a fun thing to read about. Honestly, it's not a happy book. I'm glad that the author chose to include an author's note at the end of the book, sort of explaining that this book is born out of her own personal experience and exposure to abuse. I said this in the reading vlog, but I think the book was just something that the author needed to write. It was sort of a form of catharsis for her. Yeah, so I think I think honestly the reason why the community is so divided about this book and why this book gets so much flack is because people just started to make light of the story and of the subject matter by pitting the two men in the book against each other, as if that's the most important part of the book. Like, you know, how we have like Team Edward and Team Jacob. There's also like Team Atlas and Team Ryle. And I don't think that's the conversation that this book wanted to open. I appreciate it as well as obviously it's not a fun read because of the topic, but I don't think it's a bad book. Okay, with that said, It Starts With Us is the sequel, the follow-up sequel to It Ends With Us. I didn't really like it. I think it really shows that this one was just really written for the fans. Colleen Hoover already said that she didn't really intend to write a sequel to It Ends With Us. Due to the overwhelming love that the book received from fans, she wrote the sequel just to sort of give thanks, give back to the fans. And I think that's a good reason to write a book, and it's a good sentiment, and I appreciate that she thought of her fans that way as well. But I didn't enjoy the book. It felt very shallow for me. It felt very tropey. It didn't have the same sort of impact, the same depth that It Ends With Us had. It just wasn't the book for me. So yeah. So I gave It Ends With Us 3.5 stars and It Starts With Us 2 stars. So yeah, that is those two books by Colleen Hoover. The book that I read next, I actually have a physical copy, which excites me because I never have the physical copy, and that is Illuminae by Amie Kaufman and Kristoff. So this is a YA science fiction, I think. Yeah, I think it's YA science fiction, and we are following two lovers, Katie and Ezra, but at the beginning of the book they break up. They break up and then suddenly their planet gets attacked. They had to flee for their lives. They get separated into two different spaceships, and that just begins their journey of trying to survive. Their spaceships were attacked, so it's not fully functional. They have to ration food, they have to ration people's skills, and then while they're doing all that surviving thing, this mystery disease starts spreading and people start basically like turning into this angry machines. They remind me of the zombies in World War Z. So there's an outbreak basically on this two ship, and as the protagonists of the story, they have to essentially use their skills, work together, cooperate despite their breakup to save their ships. So yeah, that is Illuminae. And the reason why I picked up this book, I actually did not know anything about the story, the plot of this book. I picked it up because I love the design of the book. So as you can see, we have the cover here, and then it's this plastic see-through acetate thing, and I have this very beautiful naked cover. I love this naked cover. And then the book itself, it's written in the form of files. All of the pages are just files. They're like memos, there are chat transcripts, there are emails, there are very non-traditional pages, and I really enjoyed reading it. I think I would have loved this so much more if I read this earlier, because honestly the storytelling itself and the plot itself is definitely very YA, and I'm not faulting it at that because it is written for YA. So it just doesn't do it for me right now. It is enjoyable. I was engaged, but you know, there are some things in here. I think I shared a couple of stories on the chat transcript. They're talking about girls, and essentially they called, I'm not sure if it was it erection or masturbating, they called it happy pants. That's how YA it was. There were a couple of beautiful lines in here. I did tab a couple of things. The author is describing this battleship, and the name of the battleship is Alexander, and this is how he described the ship. But Alexander is a he, no doubt in my mind. There's no grace to him, no real symmetry. He looks exactly like what he is, a brawler who picked a fight with someone just a little bit better. I don't know, I just really enjoyed the line. And there's another one in here. Oh, it's talking about the voice of this AI. The AI's voice is sexless. It's like a beautiful painting of a totally empty room. I love that visual. I love that visual. So that was Illuminae. I enjoyed it. I gave it 3.5 stars, and I'm excited to read the sequel. I have the second book, Gemina, already, but I'm still on the hunt for the third book, which is Obsidio, I believe. Yeah, Illuminae. Really pretty book to have on your shelves, and it's a really good read as well. Okay, and the next book that I read, if you watched my December TBR, you already know what this book is, but I read Priest by Simone. So this is a adult erotica. Yeah, I think that's the erotica romance. I think that's the category, the genre for this. In this book, we're following this young and handsome priest, Father Tyler Bell, and he meets this girl named Poppy in one of his like confession sessions. And the rest is history. I am just gonna read sort of the blurb for this book. There are many rules a priest can break. A priest cannot marry. A priest cannot abandon his flock. A priest cannot forsake his God. I've always been good at following rules until she came. Then I learned new rules. So that's the book. Honestly, on the surface level, it sounds just very salacious. It's very blasphemous, very sacrilegious. And it is. It definitely 100% is. So if you are sensitive about the topic of religion, especially Christianity, this isn't the book for you. Do not read it. You have been warned. But if you're like me, who isn't really religious, but more of a spiritual person, this book actually has a lot of good conversations about faith, about religion, about your personal relationship with a higher being, if you believe in those kinds of things. There's a lot of good conversations in there, but there's also a lot of sex, a lot of sacrilegious sex, so you kind of have to weigh those two things. I enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun reading it. And yeah, that is Priest by Simone. I think this is a 3.5 stars kind of book for me. Okay, so the last book that I read is actually a manga. I just read the second volume of Spy X Family, and if you're not familiar with Spy Family, we're following a master of disguise spy named Lloyd Forger, and he is on this mission where he has to create this fake family. But apparently, her fake wife is actually an assassin. And then they adopt a child, and apparently this child is a telepath. So there's all sorts of fun and all sorts of shenanigans in there. And it's just a good read. It's very lighthearted and I enjoy it a lot. Yeah, so those are all of the books that I read in November. It's been a while since I've done a wrap-up. I know, I think the last one I did was February. That's many months ago. And I'm very rusty. Hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully you found a book or two that you want to read. And yeah, let me know in the comments what you read this month, what your favorite book was for this month. And I will see you in the next video.